Hi everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. We're going to be talking about how to solve crisis with strategic communications, and I'm here with David Plug from Spark Plug Strategic Communications. And I've known David for quite some time now, and we've been working together. He's been really pivotal in helping me to understand not just what crisis is, but also the importance of public relations and communications in every single business. So it's a pleasure to be here with David today and speaking with you. I'm going to be passing it over to David in just a moment, and he'll have a chance to be able to speak about himself and the accomplishments that he's had and what he's really worked on for today's presentation. Most of all, though, I'd like to just mention that at the end of the presentation today, just write all your notes down. At the end, you'll have an opportunity to you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions. We'll stop the recording and we'll go one-on-one, and the whole group will be able to ask questions and get clarification. The idea of today is to develop a standard operating procedure for crisis communications in the company that you're working with, or the many companies that you work with. Also, at the end of the presentation, you're going to have an opportunity to work with David a little more closely, and that opportunity will be revealed to you at the end. So there's no rabbits out of a hat or anything like that. David obviously would like to be able to work with everyone here today. So if you'd be able to just write your questions down and be prepared to take some pretty good notes. David, again, pleasure having you here for today's presentation, and would you please tell us a little bit more about what we're going to be going through, and I also like to remind all of us to shut off our cell phones and put it on mute, and do your best to pay attention today. You get an incredible amount of information that you may or may not already know. You have a 400% better chance of remembering what you're learning here today if you just write it out. So take some notes, and even if you don't look at it later on, it becomes a cellular memory. So David, would you please welcome very much. Thank you for being here. It's a real treat to have you here. Can you please tell us a little bit more?
Thank you, everyone. Speak about the agenda in a second. I think it's important to share. So glad to see everyone, and just want to share the definition of crisis communications, because some people don't understand it or think it's a crisis communication is a negative thing, whereas it's really a successful thing. And showing you an example that public communication control the effects of a bad event that may damage an organization and a range of things like employees, products, services, financial condition, and reputation. So valuable for a range of organizations to participate in today's webinar to protect things. So I'm hoping that is of interest for you. And Odin spoke about some of the agenda. So we're going to introduce ourselves and then ask you to introduce yourselves. And then we'll share the risk communication principles. And we'll also share examples of 2017 and also current 2018, which has a current risk level. And then I'm sure you want to know, how do we address to do the process to address or prevent crises? We have crisis communication plans can assist that. And that is a service I do provide, and so that's why we're offering a special offer near the end of the presentation. And of course, we want to interact with you and hear what you want and what you think in the discussion right at the end of the webinar, so we can help. That will help us. And also, after the webinar, we'll be sending an email survey for your feedback in the next day or two. And I'm very thankful for Odin and the Canadian marketing team to invite me to give a webinar, because they give out, Odin and others, lots of conferences and boot camps and online interactions as well. So I'm very pleased about that. And I'm pleased that he's participating as well, because he's an impressive speaking and he's educated online. So, Odin, could we hear your voice and want to introduce ourselves and share your experience?
Absolutely, absolutely. So my name's Odin. I've been in business now for a number of years. We've got some people that are saying they can't connect to the Zoom, by the way. So apologize for all of you that weren't able to get into the Zoom presentation. Hopefully you're gonna be able to see this and then come to one of our live events. But I've been doing sales and marketing actively in my own business since 2001. I had a life cycles and life coaching business back then, and I had the privilege of being able to coach many people in different life cycles. And in 2007, well, between 2005 and 2007, I was an educator, a teacher at Douglas College. I also have a background in banking, and in 2007 I decided I was going to buy a marketing franchise. And so I bought the marketing franchise and got a number of clients on board in 2008, 2009, and when the financial crisis hit, I decided I was going to use a lot of my skills to go out and I built a real estate portfolio across Canada using all the marketing skills, and realized that what really brought me to a degree of success working with people was implementing the very ideas that I was taught and shown. So it's just a real pleasure to be here today with you, David, and to learn more about the importance of public relations. I think it's a topic that really needs to have a lot of marketing done behind it. I don't think that people understand the importance of public relations, the importance of what a public relation representative does, the importance of dealing with crisis communications and having that standard operating procedure. So when this opportunity came up to speak about this with you and to just listen to your expertise, your many years of expertise, it was a real eye-opening opportunity for me, and I look forward to implementing all of your ideas. So really, it's my pleasure today, David, to be here with you and with all of you here today. So thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And if you have any more questions about what I do, you can just ask David about that. We do work closely together, and I'd be more than happy to assist you with any of questions you have with marketing. But for today, David, it's all about you and crisis communications and creating that standard operating procedure. That's what I want to do. So thanks, David, for having me.
Can I ask that, although your focus is on marketing, have you had to deal with issues?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You know, I prefer to run the portion of the business that I run. I prefer to run it in a way where I avoid crisis communications, although it does sometimes happen, a crisis. I've been very lucky in how I've been able to deal with those in a political way. Of course, crises in the various businesses that I've seen, they're handled in many different ways. The most important way to handle a crisis that I found is by implementing emotional intelligence techniques. That's what I found over the years. Some specific crises that we've had are around real estate. When we were doing real estate deals, we've had a number of crises. I remember this one crisis where someone we were working with decided that they would take out all the money from our joint trust account. That was a real crisis. I'm just going over the documents right now, and what we had to do is we had to be careful not to defame the individual, or we had to be careful of making sure that we were on the good side of the law. So our communications were predominantly with the shareholders of the company, and letting them know what happened, giving them the factual details, showing them bank accounts and so on. And then what we ended up doing is, this happened to be the president of the company, no less. So we ended up having an emergency meeting after everyone found out, and we ended up voting this particular individual off as president, of course. But you know, that crisis continued for a couple of years as the individual retaliated for the decision we made of not allowing our money to be taken. That's just one small crisis that that our company has dealt with. There's been other crises as well. I remember this one time where, again, in my business, I've dealt a lot with real estate. So it's a lot. Crisis management is very much in the forefront. Just yesterday, we had a tenant getting in a fight with the tenant above, and we had to deal with crisis management. Instead of actually using the words eviction as a trigger word, we use the words peacekeeping in our communication. We want to keep the peace. So I found that words are really important when dealing with crisis. But the crises that you're going to be showing us are crises that that big organizations that don't necessarily want that focus or that attention. So I've been quite lucky that our crises haven't really gone to the media. I've been on the other side, though, where in the area where I live in, I've been advocating our area as the number 2 place on all of the Lower Mainland, is considered the smelliest place. And so we've been fighting to end the smell, so to speak, and we've had local newspapers be involved. It's been a real community effort. Our outreach in this particular crisis, the crisis was that we were being polluted by poor business acts of a local farmer. And we ended up getting the CBC in, and we've been diligently complaining about this particular crisis that's happening, and we finally got traction. The federal government came down and took tests and so on. So yeah, it's funny enough now the more we talk about it, the more I realize that sometimes my job is crisis management. So I hope that's enough that what you wanted there, David. And I think that a number of other people would also have something to share here too. So would you like me to unmute everyone, or would you like to just continue?
I'll just describe myself, and then we'll invite everyone.
Perfect.
Just to, because I'm a co-host, originally dealing with crises with me as being a journalist for newspapers and editing an international website, about.com, before Google and Facebook, before I joined public relations. After managing MediaWorks West, a media monitoring firm in Victoria, and public affairs to 2 provincial ministries, I came to Metro Vancouver, to provincial and Fraser health authorities, providing public affairs, stakeholder relations, and corporate communications as a senior consultant, director, and chief communications officer. And in the photo there, as you can see, it's a CBC one, national one, hospital spokesperson. So with doing public affairs for the health sector, there was, hospital closures and, sadly also patient complaints or about lack of access or long wait times, or maybe receiving the wrong treatment, which I'm sure you all think when you think, oh yeah, I talk about healthcare when the hospital emergency is in the photo behind me. But I also want to share that we also did business crises, such as budget problems and labor union strikes and building damage and things like that. So I hope that hearing is okay for Odin and me, and we certainly want to hear from each of you what your name is, and then what other crisis situations have you dealt with in your business. You can just state them, or you can also share briefly how it happened.
So I'm going to unmute everyone, and I'm going to ask you and encourage you to mute yourselves independently, or unmute yourselves as you want to talk. So I'm going to unmute everybody. So everyone's unmuted. Hey, everyone. So who would like to go first and tell us a bit about a crisis situation that you've dealt with? We've got a lot of examples that David's going to be going through. So tell us a bit about your crisis situations and how you've dealt with them. Any volunteers?
I'll just start by saying that I'm probably an oddball here because I'm not coming from a company. David Plug and I are at Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association.
Right.
I'm now deep in the snow in London, Ontario. That's why you haven't seen me at coffee mornings. And I'm just one of the electric car enthusiasts who is interested in how to handle, and all of us as a group actually, how to handle bad news, which we suspect very often has originated in the oil industry. Non-information or disinformation media releases that come out from time to time. So that's me. Did I say my name? Peter Miller. There I am on the screen. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
I'm Lorraine Wilson.
Hi, Lorraine.
Hey, I'm now a freelance consultant, but over the past 20 years or so in the industry, I have worked on a number of crises with either organizations I've been associated with or independently supporting a crisis. And those sectors have been in the food industry, healthcare, and also finance. But, you know, the common thread in all of them was really just, and sometimes organizations don't have a crisis communications plan ready, or they put it in their desk and 5 years later they're dusting it off and their messages are no longer consistent with the organization. But the success of the projects that I worked on was making sure you had spokespeople that were confident and had the ability to deliver a message. Timeliness was really important, getting ahead of the game, and particularly now with social media, you know, a lot of customers or clients take to the social media channels to express how unhappy they are or share something that might be totally inappropriate. And if you don't get on top of that straight away, it just starts to gather moss where other people start jumping on the bandwagon, and then it becomes a really a bigger problem than you anticipated. So I just think having the right spokespeople, the right message, the timeliness of it all, and really trying to be as available to the media. You know, there's certain things you can't say, but there's a lot you can say, and I think that kind of diffuses a lot of the crisis situations.
Awesome. Thank you. That was awesome. It makes me want to ask you questions.
Oh.
That's why we have a discussion later. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly why we have a discussion later. So that's perfect.
Next.
Okay. Am I going to pop on here?
Yeah.
It's Ian McLeod.
Hi, Ian.
I have spent a lot of my career on major construction projects. And so one of the worst things that can happen there is a construction fatality. And there was one large project I was working on where we had two unrelated fatalities on the same day, which was a great shock to us as the owner of the project and also to the communities where they took place. So it was, as Lorraine said, a matter of trying to get out in front of the problem and make sure that you had you indicated to people that you were on the job, that you were dealing with the safety authorities and trying to get to the bottom of how the fatalities took place. And I would only say that I haven't had to do this in the world of social media, so interested to pursue that one. Thank you.
You're lucky. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Who else?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. I've been blessed to not have to deal with the crisis in the public eye in terms of social media. I would like to be more prepared. So for today, that is my hope, is to get that operating procedure down pat and to motivate myself, as Lorraine said, and we met when you were with Van City, I believe, to motivate myself to get a current plan in place that addresses what would be our most likely crisis situation, and that is something happening to a person in care, involving one of our team members perhaps. We also have a clothing collection business, so there have been some fatalities of people diving into bins. Just wanting to be prepared to protect our reputation, have our spokespeople trained up, and as you say, good messaging. Wondering if I'm missing anything, and particularly keen on tips to manage crises in a social media environment.
Awesome. Thanks, Monique. That was Monique, right?
Yes, Monique,
perfect.
Possibilities.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Rush Paul, do you want to go?
Hello?
Are you there? I heard you for a second.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Oh.
Faintly, but you're there.
Okay. My
Barely.
experience in crisis communications is primarily I was heading up the communications wing of, and for those of you in Vancouver might remember this, but the Air Care program.
Air Care program. Rashpal, could you just go a little bit closer to your speakerphone? I'm straining to hear you.
Okay, I'm actually on a head mic.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay.
Yeah, our crisis, it developed because when the provincial government announced the end of the Air Care program, we actually were not informed until the actual announcement.
Yeah.
And so our focus right now, or then, early on, was that we had to maintain a first set of communications with our stakeholders, specifically with our employees who, we had a major challenge of dealing with employee morale because they were just told that they had 2.5 years of work left. And they felt very discouraged, very dissatisfied, and somewhat, I guess you'd say, disenfranchised by government. So it took us the 2.5 years where we had to actually make sure that they understood that, we were on their side and that we were keeping them up to date on any information we had, but to ensure that their morale stayed high because we still had 2.5 years of work left. So that took quite a bit of time working with our HR department, with our government oversight to ensure that, we were able to maintain that open line communication with our employees, with our internal and external stakeholders, and really ensuring that they understood why the decision was made and the fact that we were still committed to ensuring that we met our overall campaign objectives.
It's interesting, Rashpal, is because I was just talking to my wife the other day. I was saying, why did they shut down Air Care? It never filtered down to me as to why it ever really shut down. I just found out one day, oh, it shut down. So it's interesting that you handle that crisis in such a way. And of course, it was a crisis. Thank you so much. That's really great. And I think we have Robert on here too. Robert, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Odin.
Hey. Well, thanks for being here. So right now what we're doing is we're talking about how we've handled crises in the back. And thanks for being here. I know that you got on a little bit late. You're having some difficult time logging in. So thank you for being here. Do you have any examples of crises that you've had to manage or someone around you have had to manage? Maybe in the media or not in the media?
Well, I guess if I look at what you define as a crisis, I guess I've had two. In my involvement with franchises, you're always dealing with the law in the marketplace with regards to what can occur if franchisee gets disgruntled and wants to try to get out of his agreement, etc. Usually one of the methodologies is to find a lawyer that will help them cause problems for the franchisor. And in my situation, as an independent contractor, you still find yourself liable in the marketplace should something occur where a franchisee is claiming misrepresentation. And I've had that happen to me twice. And both times they're just using whatever they can find or concoct in order to leverage the situation with the franchisor. It may be that they're just unhappy with the way things have gone, or they've had an argument with somebody, who knows. But usually you end up getting, I've twice been called back in, having to deal with the legal side of that situation where franchisees are wanting to extricate themselves from the franchise. Interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating take on how crisis can be managed. And it's thank you very much. That's awesome. Was there anybody else, David, that we hasn't yet spoken? I think everyone has spoken.
Are there more people?
I think everyone has spoken, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Sorry that some couldn't log in.
That's okay. We'll get them the recordings. So I'm just muting everyone else. Great. So let's continue on.
Yeah, especially at 12:30. So.
Yeah, exactly. You got to now go through it.
Well, I want to say thank you everyone for sharing your name and what you dealt with before. And we do hope that your organizations are not damaged by a tough crisis going forward. But we do expect that today's webinar discussions will aid everyone to be successfully manage an issue or a crisis. And I expect that when you talk with your colleagues in your company, they will respect you for your knowledge and actions on how to address issues or crisis. So I'm really happy. And I'm really hoping that you continue to participate when we have a discussion near the end of the webinar. And I do have to share that we do have to accept that issues or a company crisis are much more public now. Even an issue is started by a single unhappy customer or employee or an online troll guy, with billions of people relying on social media. I mean, just 2 billion just on Facebook and many more. Then a story, especially with an image or a video, can quickly be internationally popular, even on news media. Unfortunately, we must accept that these issues can affect your business performance, reputation, and financial bottom line, as per the definition at the beginning.
What's really interesting, David, is that a slow news cycle looks for interesting news, and a crisis is interesting and newsworthy. So unfortunately, when we take a look at the candidate, we all remember the candidate that urinated in a homeowner's mug. It was caught on camera. I mean, that was, I can't even believe somebody would do such a thing. That's that's a real crisis. And on this one down here, it was a slow news day, and lo and behold, this restaurant owner decided that he was going to mix this barbecue sauce with his hand, even though numerous employees walk back and forth and say, hey, maybe use a wooden spoon. One guy actually goes and gets him a utensil in order to use that. So these are conscious choices these individuals are making, and how do we make the people that we work with have more aware, conscious choices? Clearly, the choices that these guys made was not beneficial and caught onto the news, right, David?
And I have optimism, expect that you are open to this informative discussion about issues management and crisis communication. Not everyone is, but if you registered in, then you are available. We have some legitimate education to give that we hope to enable you to manage and prevent issues from occurring and affecting your performance and reputation. So good crisis management can ensure positive reputation for you personally by your colleagues, and also by the public and the real news media, so we can move forward. Now, as I said, some people are unfamiliar with crisis communications term and worry that it's a negative word, negative communication, where it's really solving and engaging communications. And from the United States Homeland Security, sorry. This is their verification that a business must be able to respond promptly, accurately, and confidently during an event. So if your colleagues or your leaders say, well, we don't want to have a crisis, so why have a crisis communication plan? This is a proof that a range of organizations do need to be prepared.
So would you say that step one in creating a standard operating procedure is know who to talk to when it comes to crisis communication, and have them on your speed dial? Of course, we never plan for a problem to happen, but if a problem does happen, we'll know who to talk to. And then would you say the next step after that is making sure that we have these steps in place, making sure that we're able to respond promptly? What is promptly, out of curiosity? Is that within 5 minutes of us finding out that the event happened? Or is that within 1 hour or 2 hours or 5 hours of that happening? In our standard operating procedure, what should we put there? And when you say accurately and confidently, what you're talking about is you're talking about removing emotions out of the situation and putting in actual factual details that will help everyone who is feeling those emotions to just calm themselves and realize we have to deal with the facts here. Yes, a crisis has happened. Is that the kind of stuff we need to be writing down right now in our policies and procedures and standard operating procedures as we go forward, David?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because not everyone is aware of issues and how to manage crisis, and so you can share this kind of information that will be helpful within the price in the plan. But promptly, it nowadays is much more faster because things can get posted very quickly and shared very widely. But if you have a crisis communications plan, then you already have the messaging and the process, so you know how to move forward very quickly.
Cool.
Now, here's the reason why I did compassion, courage, and optimism. It's the 3 key messages. It's proven as risk communication strategy. The 3 key messages, number 1 is respect people. 2 is to share the necessary information, even if it's bad news. And then in your 3rd message, it's a rapid response with plans and actions to address the current and maybe even prevent future issues.
And you have examples of this coming up and how this has actually been implemented by other companies. So this will help us a lot. That's perfect.
More tips later coming on too.
Mm-hmm.
And just to validate, the 3 key messages for risk communication is proven by the research and performance by Dr. Vincent Covello, who has supported World Health Organization, the U.S. White House for Environment, and also the mayor of New York before the 9/11 terrorism incident, which most of you probably remember. The mayor was respected back then more because he gave a rapid response that day, with his accepting people's perception of it being the most difficult day for the history of the city and sharing his heart for reacting to the people being hurt or murdered by the terrorism. The wording's on the right here. And people were also impressed that he committed to rebuilding and being a strong example of the city not being lowered by terrorism. So they appreciated that. So this is a bit of a validation that 3 key messages, compassion, courage, and optimism, are effective.
So as a part of our standard operating procedure, those 3 points need to be on it, and then we're going to build it based on those 3 points.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just some additional proof is validated by the Forbes magazine, for example, that it's addressing the risk communication addresses stressed people. So his key points to remember about people who are in high stress environment. Stressed people typically have a difficult hearing, understanding, and remembering everything that you've shared. They want to know that you care before they try to care all of what you know. Caring is 50% proven to establish trust. So half the time, caring, trust them. And it's judged in the first 30 seconds of when you're talking to them. And the first thing they hear in the last info that you share is what they remember the most. So because of their stress, they are more likely actively looking for visual and graphic information to support your verbal messaging. So it's just not writing, but also sharing photos. And that's more of a deal nowadays because it's more accessible for people for photos, for example.
So when you say caring, then what you're meaning is that the step 1 is respect people. So you're really saying you got to put yourself in the other guy's shoes. You got to see what it is they're feeling. That's emotional intelligence, by the way. And that step 1 is really important, that respect people, and then share necessary information, but be sincere within your first 30 seconds. Pretty cool. Awesome. Thank you.
I appreciated having Dr. Vincent Covello do a workshop in British Columbia for health authorities. It was very helpful, teaching me and many other people. And just an example of the caring thing, he had a broken knee because he, for World Health Organization, was helping a South Asian country government to address people. But the speaker said that he didn't want to do the carrying at the start. He wanted to share the bad news right away. So it was a riot because the people didn't think that the government was caring about them and would help them. They felt that they were being hit. And so they decided to riot, and that's why he got injured. Sorry about that. Let's, we were talking about how crises are important nowadays still. And here's 3 examples from 2017. Some proof that there's more publicity about crises nowadays than before. And that your performance in responding to a crisis can be published by news media and other sources. So we got 3 recent examples from Forbes again. Here's the first one. It's Pepsi, and it's about advertising. So I'm going to ask Odin, since he's marketing and familiar with this, to describe what had happened and how they responded.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was, as we all know, the crisis in the United States with a bunch of, I guess you could say, Black Lives Matters in movement was with a bunch of Black people that were being killed in the communities and so on. There was a ton of civil unrest, we can say. There was lots of rallies and protests and so on. And this was all happening, I believe it was around last summer, last spring, last summer in 2017. And it was great because I saw this commercial, and then all of a sudden there was just this pushback, and the pushback happened instantly. And it was kind of neat to see how Pepsi was going to take the Black Lives Matters scenario in protest. And this lady just kind of walks through the crowd to this guy that's standing in front of all the protesters, gives them a Pepsi, and all of a sudden everyone is joyful and happy, and it's all forgiven kind of thing, that Pepsi has the ability to make peace. The idea behind, when I think about it, Pepsi has the ability to bring peace. That I like the marketing idea behind that. The approach got an incredible amount of pushback. They instantly realized what their mistake was and pulled the ad right away, saying that it missed the mark. And so this, I would say, this is an example of Pepsi's wise approach to a crisis. And here what we're talking about is how they handled it well, not how they botched it up and continue to run that ad for months afterwards. So I would say a good job with Pepsi on this particular one, right, David?
Yeah. And so you can tell your leadership, if they aren't convinced that they're risky for an issue, you can say that even just advertising can cause an issue because people might perceive it differently. Maybe the messaging's wrong. And while the slide says eventually pulled the ad, actually Pepsi pulled it very quickly.
Very quickly.
That the messaging wasn't right.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. Example number 2. Women lost 44 pounds was published by Cosmopolitan magazine, but they failed to include that her cancer was part of it. And so readers were insensitive, and they were sharing the issue so much that even newspapers like Washington Post published "Cancer is not a diet plan." So even though it's one lady, it was in the public. And this is the second example in Forbes magazine. Thankfully, like Pepsi, they eventually changed their headline and made it more accurate for a magazine. That's pretty impressive. And so the news media reported about it, that they did the right thing.
Oh.
And the third example is probably well known. United Airlines had its reputation dropped down by a decade amount due to customers sharing photos and videos of the awkward dragging out of a passenger on an overbooked plane. A part of the ongoing concern was its first reaction was to justify its action. United Airlines was justifying its action for quite some time. Eventually, the CEO apologized to the customers and
days later. This is an example of what not to do in a crisis situation is right here. Learn from their mistakes, right?
That's why it's a top example of crisis by Forbes, because it was so big. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have an example of a good pull, instantaneous, how you should have dealt with it with Pepsi, and then you have, in contrast, how United Airlines ended up just justifying it, and it took days for them to to issue an apology, and then they ended up changing the industry with giving seats up and so on. So this, it caused a lot of issues.
And losing their 10-year reputation was proven by surveys among the general public, not just the people on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fairly big one.
They should have had you on speed dial.
Yeah, especially as planes go fast, they should be fast for flying as well.
Yeah.
So there is risk.
Oh, you got the Dominos guy down there. That was recent locally too. That's great.
If your business colleagues ask if, they need to pay attention, if there really is a risk, the answer is you can share examples of how organization reputations are being quickly affected by social media images and videos, even from a single person like a customer or employee. So the bottom video, well, the top video is the one Odin described on another slide. The second one is a Surrey one. A Domino's pizza delivery guy was filmed in an elevator of eating a customer's pizza. It was on Global TV and CTV, and 19,200 people shared the news on Facebook. Even though it was just a new employee who made a small mistake. And the news interviewed the vice president from Ontario about the Surrey worker.
Wow.
So, if there wasn't social media and it wasn't a video, and years ago, this probably wouldn't have been a big deal. Whereas this is an example of that one person putting their hand in barbecue sauce or eating someone else's pizza, that can be a big deal. So there is risk. There is realistic. We do need to pay attention, and you do need to convince your colleagues.
So the lesson on your standard operating procedure, which you're writing down here, the lesson is to let the people that you're working with know that you're always being recorded.
Yeah.
So if you think twice, and maybe even 3 times, it's that old saying, that old wise saying, it's measure three times, cut once. So think 3 times, act once would really be a good idea to educate the people through your standard operating procedure. Great lesson.
There are types of issues, for example, minor ones, somewhat minor, are mistakes by one person. Just the unfriendly advertising, or someone making a mistake with customer service. And a higher level one is an accident, for example, a car or a plane collision. Perhaps Peter and Rashpal can share us some things about that later on. This is just some photos of example where the media are saying it's bad and they're mad. So it does, even if it's just a car accident, a mistake, it can be published and affecting your reputation. And the worst one, of course, is a disaster, such as like an office fire or flood. The Western Canada busiest emergency room was closed for 2 weeks because a construction company in Surrey accidentally cracked open the main water thing, and so there was a flood into the thing. And it was thankfully the Fraser Health Communications Department did a good job in communicating. So if we have a discussion later on, I can share more about that. But also not just physical damage, but also leadership issues when the company, when your organization is not doing the right thing for a long time. This is a very frequent current issue. All about sexual harassment by the leaders or staff.
You know what's interesting about this, just to add, is that women's rights are changing because of this. Women are being given the opportunity to speak out, be believed, and have this crazy what these guys are doing attitudes end, or at least it looks to me that these kind of attitudes are ending. So I would say that this crisis for these people is a crisis, but for the greater society, it's helping us question our sense of morals and duty and responsibility and relationship and how we treat people well. So I think that there's always maybe something positive that can come out of a crisis, so maybe new standard operating procedures. But I heard some crises where people pass away and stuff like that, and I don't really think there's anything, when that's a real crisis. Not saying that this is less, but I suppose different crises have different moral communications that we have too. So in our standard operating procedure, should we be taking a look at the possibilities of what good things can happen out of a crisis? Can we spin that, and when should we do that, David?
It's just examples of the leadership not doing the right thing is that, for example, with Netflix, it cost them $39 million. And Harvey Weinstein from the U.S. Movie thing got removed, and they're making much publication around why he's inappropriate. So it makes it also think that the organization is risky. And two political leaders in Ontario and New Nova Scotia have been removed. And actually also the other party, the federal government, is being accused now as well. And look at RCMP, 25,000 sexual assaults since 2015 because there were no charges laid. And they're the ones who are supposed to protect us. So that affects them. And New York Times article, about how the Catholic Pope was apologizing to victims who were abused, but he still questioned them. And so there's still doubt to them. So that's why it's important that it concerns your care, your compassion. You need to appreciate the real risk, and you need to share it with your colleagues so that you can address it and speak it properly. So how to address, I'm sure we've been talking about how there are risks, but I'm sure for a webinar you guys are eager to know how to address it. So we're moving it on, and we're going to try and be very quick because it is 12:50. So to address the crisis, in addition to your rapid, respectful response, also ensure that internal staff are informed and engaged as much or more than with the public. For example, if there was a dangerous infection at our hospital, we would want the nurses and other staff to share the same risk communication directly to the patients and visitors, not just rely upon communications of the CEO. And to communicate to the public and internal staff, you will leverage trustworthy leaders and media spokespersons. You may also make your leaders ensure that a task force is set up and follows up on the public commitments to actions to quickly address the crisis. That's the current issue. To address a potential issue in the future, you can ensure there is research, discussion, and plans developed for crisis management so that your teams can respond quickly and well. I'm glad Sparkplug can assist people to develop those plans. And be prepared with a plan. Once a crisis strikes through, you won't have time to start from scratch. So having a written plan in advance will save you precious time and added stress. Consider potential scenarios that could happen and detail written media procedures. Include a list of people in your organization that you will need on the crisis team, including leadership, department managers, human resources, customer service staff, and public relations. So it's not just you. You do need to share it with your colleagues. Make sure that the listed people in your company are aware and appropriately involved with making the plan and are convinced to participate if a crisis actually happens. So a rapid response is effective but does now also need a wider range of sources, such as social media, in-person presentations, and messaging staff, more so than before.
So it's a full training program, essentially. You have to train everyone from the top all the way down so that the people at the bottom are able to communicate that message and not depend upon the guy on the top, so that everyone's on the same team and has the same messaging. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and you'll know, you'll benefit because you'll know about the range of potential issues and also the various different audiences that are out there that have different reactions. And you'll have draft that is reviewed and approved on how to address it, both the message and the method.
Cool.
So here's a crisis management process. You want to write a plan down. It's the foundation of the standard operating procedure. To manage current and to prevent future issues, you can share your crisis management process. The 3 key messages for risk communication that we just shared are used in the response section in the yellow area there. But you can also input into your plans for preparedness before issues if you have a plan. And if it's very appropriate, crisis communication will also assist with finish and follow up for active issues. Would welcome being an assistant for current and future, help preparing people for future issues. Now, a crisis, a real crisis, can take a lot of time for your organization to handle. So sometimes you have to don't expect to not get work done unless you have a designated individual to handle the crisis.
Or someone like Sparkplug.
If they don't have a larger organization with a good communications team. But it's an example of how multiple audiences need information and engagement due to a crisis, and that many of your colleagues need to be shared to do the communication. For examples are employees and their families, customers, suppliers, news media, regulators, the incident task force, and elected officials and public agencies. And of course, the community and neighbors are the ones who are receiving it. Look at the different people, the HR people, the sales, purchasing, and management people who are the ones sharing the information. And if you want assistance and collaboration from your colleagues on the plan, here's an example of a strategic plan and the actions that are done. So you will interact with them. You'll draft the key messages and the approach to the draft materials. Then you deal with the leadership. You get the appropriate departments to analyze your plan and confirm the messaging and the approach. And it does have a public launch at the bottom, but nowadays it is much more other approaching as well. For example, social media. For example, with the flood in the emergency room, we did not have a traditional press conference with reporters coming in. They appreciated having tweet website updates and social media films and daily updates and things like that. So speaker opportunities, you need to deal with your colleagues so they can speak. It's helpful if you have partner organizations to confirm that you are dealing with the crisis properly, and getting customers or the rest of the public to share the success story. And it's also important to have some key performance tracking information. So try and be fast here. So if you have to deal with your leadership to talk about, well, you have a crisis, how do you talk to a leader? You express first, you do compassion. So you express your appreciation for who they are and how they will work with you. But then you need to share the necessary information. So you provide the facts about the status and also the needs to address the difficult situation. And then the optimism. Describe the solutions, verify how you're going to be successful and how you're going to collaborate with other people in your organization, and how you have messages and media spokesperson and hopefully a crisis communication plan that was already written and done. So if you do have a crisis communication plan that is well done and appropriate and you need to use it, you will be successful. You will ensure that your staff communicate effectively with coworkers and customers. And you also enable the public and partners to perceive positively on how to address or prevent issues in accordance with your mission and values, and also enhancing your reputation possibly, which would, of course, help increase engagement and possibly maybe even retail for some companies. That's being if you're effective. So here's a question for to hear from you, everyone.
But maybe we should, because of our pinch for time, maybe we'll have you think about these and then just move on.
Oh, we had 3 examples, and that we were just going to quickly ask for people to briefly say how they think they would now address to it. For example, Peter works at the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association. The simple example here I put was, if an electric car has an accident due to running out of power or a charging issue, is that a bigger deal because it's very popular now and people think it's better, safer than gas? But there are critics, and so the critics might raise it. So Peter, are you available to share how you think you would respond to this?
Hey, David.
Well, sure. When we're not being a corporate group, we're a user group, but we do have a president, and we are looking to him to send a rebuttal to newspaper stories or even media news clips on the news. And the specific thing I'm sure he will use, and we talk about amongst ourselves, is there are hundreds of thousands of miles of safe driving in an electric vehicle. One happens to have a battery pack explode, which on review turned out to be a piece of scrap metal, I think, in the street, which punctured it. And we just quickly point out that the statistics of internal combustion engine cars catching a light are frequent. And in the same period, maybe there's been hundreds of car fires. They don't make the news.
Okay.
So it's a disproportionate attention paid just because it's an electric car.
Okay, thank you, Peter. But unfortunately, looking at the time here in BC, not in Ontario, it's close to the end. So I will ask people to take these 3 examples and test it themselves back at their business, how they would do it.
And then they can talk to you about that, and maybe you can have a conversation or something. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation later. The
Yeah.
first example is, what if an employee discriminates somebody, whether it be Islamic or not a French or English speaker, things like that is done. The electric car is the second one. The third one is example in Victoria, Vancouver, and Surrey about where a customer complains about being filmed in a washroom or a shower by an employee or another person. So how would you address those? Is this something maybe, as a test later on? And we're near the end of the webinar. If I can just share a special offer that I would be glad with my colleagues to review your current crisis management process and make suggestions on how to improve it. And because of the people who signed in today, I will make a special offer. So if a major issue is already happening, Sparkplug will limit the cost to only $250. And if you think a crisis management plan is good to be developed in your organization, we will do some free facilitating with you and your colleagues to draft and review the plan that is pertinent to your organization. We'll say that the same limited cost is just $250.
That's a crazy deal for what you just showed us. I was thinking earlier today, it's an example of those people who get insurance but don't need it. I want all of us to have crisis management but never need it. But what about those people that don't have insurance and do need it? Would they have spent $250? So it's a very small price to pay to be prepared for some kind of crisis. Very small price to pay. That's a great deal. It's a great deal.
I thought it was $250 off.
No, it's $250. It's a great deal. It's an amazing deal. Yes.
For professional service.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So I think that's the end of our presentation. What we're going to do is we're going to stop